The scripture passage for this morning is Luke chapter 6, verses 27 to 36. Luke chapter 6, verse 27 to 36. I'll be reading out of the NIV. But I tell you who hear me, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If someone strikes you on one cheek, turn him the other also. If someone takes your cloak, do not stop him from taking your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies and do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be the sons of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. I want to start this morning with just a simple question as we reflect on this text. And that question is, what if Jesus meant what he said? What if what Jesus said here in Luke at that Sermon on the Plain thousands of years ago, he really meant it? And he really meant it for me, and he really meant it for you, and he meant it for us. What if that is what Jesus really wants us to do? If that is what Jesus really wants our lives to look like? What if Jesus really meant what he said? What would that mean for us? How would that change our lives? What if he really meant what he said? Now I'm going to go in and I've got a whole sermon here prepared with different notes, and we're going to look at this in different angles and different ways. But if you just take some time to reflect on that question, I think you're going to have plenty of kind of internal spiritual work to work on. But we'll go on. But again, I encourage you just circle back to that and just reread that text at home. Maybe think about it. What if Jesus really meant what he said? So let's work through this text. Let's look at some of these things and see if we can learn a little bit of what Jesus is saying, and maybe get some encouragement from this, and probably some challenge. I know we're all probably going to get some challenging understandings for this, because it's a challenging text. So Jesus just jumps right in after last week. We were looking at the teachings he had about the blessings and the curses. Blessed are these, woe to these. And then he jumps right in and he keeps going further. But I say to you, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. And so Jesus is saying, this is how I want you to treat people that are your enemies, people that you hate, people that hate you, people that are actively doing harm to you, attacking you, slapping you, hitting you, taking your possessions, stealing from you, that are your enemies. This is what I want you to do. And so I was just thinking what a typical response is in a situation like this. So whether we're thinking on a personal scale, so sometimes we think, when we read these words, we think of a personal person, like an attack on my personhood, or we could think of it at a broader scale, an attack on a community, or attack on a society, an attack on a nation. I think they kind of apply in different ways. So the typical response is kind of the normal human responses to these situations where you have an enemy actively seeking to do harm to you in a variety of different ways, whether it be through violence, or be through theft, or other means of taking advantage of you. So a couple different ways we respond. One is ignore. Try to ignore them, right? So a lot of time maybe you remember a teacher or a parent telling you this, that if someone was bothering you, someone was bullying you, what did you like say? Just ignore them. Eventually they'll give up. Eventually it'll go away. And that can come out in more adult ways too, right? If someone is really bugging you at work, someone who maybe feels like an enemy to you, you just kind of say like, okay, don't respond to them. Just stay in your lane, and eventually things will work its way out. So one response is to ignore. Another response is to fight back, right? So to get even. If you're being attacked, you attack them back, or you defend yourself, or whatever it is. And this is a pretty powerful one, right? This is this myth of being able to attack your attacker to defend yourself. There's a lot of material out there, and it's kind of ingrained in our human nature. This is the response. So the last one I'm going to talk about is flight. So we can ignore, we can fight, or we can flight, run away. Of these three, kind of the one in most societies, within most humans, we kind of lean towards the fight response. That's where we give the most honor and respect for someone who fights back, someone who defends themselves, someone who stands up to the bully. And this myth of redemptive violence, that's kind of what it's referred to. I've heard it called that myth of redemptive violence, where you can redeem yourself and defend yourself and get back at your enemy. And this myth is strong, right? I mean, how many of us, I'm sure 100%, we're not in the room, we can't put hands up, but I'm sure all of us have heard the story, right, of maybe it was you, maybe it was your brother, maybe it was someone else at school where they were being bullied, they were being picked on, something happened and they were ignoring them, they were just keeping to themselves, and finally one day they kind of hauled out and smoked somebody, they hit them, and everyone was amazed, like, oh, we never knew that person was so strong. He put that person in the face, and then from then on, that person had everyone's respect because that person stood up for themselves and put the bully in their place. Like, that is just a powerful story within our society. We've all heard it. There's songs written about it. There's movies written about it, about these redemptive heroes that come in and do this act of justice and set things right. And it's even laced through our national narrative, right? How many of us in our history classes, we heard this when we hear about kind of the original settlers of the Americas were being taken advantage by the British emperor or British royalty with the taxes, and we have this kind of national narrative where these hard-working settlers and colonists who are trying to survive and escape persecution in Europe, they came to the United States, they worked hard, and finally they had enough, and they broke out in this Revolutionary War, and they proved themselves stronger than the British Empire, and they overthrew them in this great act of redemptive violence. And that is kind of the foundational act of America. And we've adopted that mentality that we're these gentle, hardworking people. We're trying to survive. We're trying to do what's best. But if we get pushed too far, if you encroach on us too much, we will rear up and bear our strength and show you that you can't mess with us. That started at the very origin of our country, and we still see that myth cycling through. It's still a huge part of the American identity as most of us have been taught it. And so that's kind of the natural response to someone who is being aggressive towards us, someone who is our enemy. We can try to ignore them, we can rear up and fight them, or we can run away. And to run away is usually just treated as an act of cowardice, and we don't want to think about that. But Jesus here in this teaching doesn't talk about any of those three. He doesn't say ignore the person. He doesn't say fight back to the person. He doesn't say run away from the person. He says actively love that person. Go towards that person with acts of love and mercy and kindness. Do good to them. Pray for them. And that's just, whoa. What? So all of our natural human inclinations, we need to throw them out the window. And Jesus says, this is what I want you to do. Pray for those who persecute you. Love them. Show them kindness. Do good to them. Move towards them in grace and love and mercy. Don't move towards them in retaliation and violence. And we look at this and we just say, how? And we saw how Jesus modeled this, right? He didn't just teach this, he did it. He lived this out in his very last words on the cross. I'll read this to you from Luke chapter 23, verses 33. It says, when they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, and on his right and one on his left. And then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. His very last words were Jesus living out these very teachings. He says, pray for those who persecute you. When he was in the midst of being persecuted and even martyred and killed for nothing, he was innocent. His last words were, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. Jesus modeled this for us perfectly. Now, usually at this point, most of us think, yeah, but I'm not Jesus. I mean, Jesus was perfect. He was the Son of God. He was, incarnate, fully God, fully human. That's not me. I can't do that. So yeah, that's probably realistic. Like we can't all do everything Jesus did. So the next question then, what about Stephen? What about could we do what Stephen did? Stephen was the first martyr in the Christian story. In Acts chapter 7, he was appointed one of the deacons of the church, and he was persecuted and eventually martyred for his faith. He was stoned to death, so a crowd of people came together and threw stones at him until he died. But again, the very last words we see coming out of Stephen's mouth, Acts chapter 7, verse 50, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. So we can't be Jesus. Can we be Stephen? Can I be Stephen? Could you be Stephen? And I just want to kind of go down this rabbit trail a little bit, because we do have this idea of saints in the church. And I know within the Mennonite church we don't venerate saints per se, but we still have this. We still, as humans, we're always drawn to heroes. Right? We're drawn to hero figures. Whether you can read through the Old Testament, you see the heroes that are lifted up there. We know the saints of the church. There's always we always gravitate towards heroes, and not just within the faith community. All around us, we gravitate towards heroes, whether it's famous people, sports athletes, singers, entertainers. We always have heroes, and I think we need to look like. So what attracts us to these heroes is that a hero kind of lives out something that is an ideal. And usually it's something that we can't do ourselves, right? So let's look at a common hero in Northeast Ohio, LeBron James. I'm living in LeBron James's hometown now, and he is certainly a hero of this town. He's hero of Northeast Ohio, hero of any Cavs fan. He brought a championship to us. And LeBron is a hero because of the amazing things that he can and does do on the basketball court. Just unbelievable how he can dominate a game. And we could go into this forever, but he's a hero that we look to because he's able to do these incredible things that none of us are able to do. No other human being on earth is able to do. I mean, if you would have taken me as a 12-year-old boy and put me in the best basketball schools, camps, whatever, worked me 8 hours a day and honing in my basketball skills and, giving me all the best coaches, all these things, I still would have had no chance to be able to do what LeBron does. I couldn't do it. It's an impossibility for me. And so we look to LeBron as a hero because he's able to do things we aren't able to do. And that's a lot of times what heroes are. They're able to do the things that we'd love to do, but we can't do them. And so do you see the danger in that when we think of heroes of the faith, when we think of Christian heroes, and we start to think, well, LeBron James can do this on a basketball court, and I never could. And so it's kind of useless for me to try to do what LeBron does. I would just hurt myself and look like an idiot doing it. But if we translate that over to the Christian faith, and we look at people like Stephen, the first martyr, and say he was a hero, I mean, I think it's good to say he is a hero. He's someone to emulate. But if we say he's a hero in the sense that he was able to do something that I am not able to do, that's where I think it becomes dangerous. Because then we elevate him, and we say he had some sort of special gift. He had some sort of ability to be a faithful Christian that I myself do not possess. And so it's good for Stephen to read this text in Luke and understand what Jesus said to him and to be able to live that out. I'm glad Stephen could do that. And Stephen's a hero, but for me, I'm just a regular guy. I'm no hero. I couldn't do that. And I think that's dangerous. Because to circle back with the very first thing that we talked about here, if Jesus meant what he said, and he was saying it to all of us, not just the heroes. So I think we need to be careful about Christian heroes, that we don't elevate people above ourselves, and thus doing that, give ourselves license to dismiss things, saying, oh, I don't have to do that. I'm not a hero. I'm not capable of that. I'm glad there are other people that can, but not me. I'm not a hero. So just be mindful of that, of what those complications of heroes of the faith. So what it boils down to, though, is when we look at this text, it's really just a hard text, right? It goes against our natural human instincts. It goes against all the things that would just kind of naturally boil up inside of us. It also goes against the things that we've been taught, whether it be through movies, whether it be through history books, wherever it is, like it goes against those things. And so it's a very difficult text. So I want to pivot here and just end with two things that I think are helpful for us to understand as we think about how to live this out in our lives. And the first is that implicit to this text, even though Jesus doesn't come out and say it right out that this is how it is, but I think it's there, that there's the understanding that this is done within a community, that we cannot do that on our own, that this text is impossible to live out as one individual Christian, as one individual disciple of Jesus. It has to be done within a community of believers, within a church that is doing this together. Because we just can't do these things on our own. It takes a broader community to be able to have that ability to take the amount of risks here. You have to know that you belong somewhere in order to be able to take these risks. And let me expand on that a little bit. Psychologists and counselors talk about this sense of belonging, and maybe this will help explain a little bit of what I'm saying. That in a relationship, so whether maybe think of it as a spouse or a family member or a close friend, you can only be really vulnerable and open within that relationship unless you have a secure sense of belonging. So let's imagine it's a friendship and you've known your friend for a long time. If you know that this friend will be by your side no matter what, that they've walked with you through difficult times before, they're walking through difficult times with you now, they have your complete trust, you can be very vulnerable and open with them. You can take risks. You can share things with them that you haven't shared before. You can be open. So you have that sense of belonging, that you belong within this friendship, and nothing you really say will make your friend turn away and leave you. So you need that sense of belonging, and that's true in all relationships, whether it's in spouses and families and wherever it is. If that sense of belonging isn't there, if you have an idea that if you say the wrong thing around this person, and they'll turn their back on you, then you're not going to be vulnerable, right? You're going to protect yourself. You're going to be guarded with your words. You're not going to say things that will get you turned back on. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but you're going to be careful with what you say. You're not going to take a risk because you're not assured of your sense of belonging, and so you'll be guarded. And I think that same concept can be extrapolated into this text. That unless you know you belong to a church family, unless you know you belong to a community that will have your back, that if someone is attacking you, whether it's violently or whether they're taking your possessions, and Jesus says, if someone wants something, you give it to them. If you're going to compromise yourself in this way, if you're going to radically give away your possessions and do all these different things, you need to know that you belong to a community that's going to have your back. You need to know you belong to a church that if you literally impoverish yourself following out these commands of Jesus, that you'll still have a group of people that will surround you and lift you up and support you in that, so you won't be left alone out there in the middle of nowhere, having followed Jesus' teachings and having nothing left and doing good to those who persecute you and just continue to be out there all by yourself. But if you have that community that if you know that Crown Hill Mennonite Church will have your back, and if someone asks of something of you that you know it would be a huge risk to help them in such a way, even if it's your enemy, but if you know that the church will have your back, I think it can give you the assurance to live this out. So I think implicit in all these things that Jesus is teaching here is the understanding that we do this as communities, and sometimes the whole community needs to do this, not just an individual, but we as a whole church sometimes will give to those and act lovingly to our church enemies, even though today we don't really have those identified, which is a great privilege, but it can happen at a community level. But we need to know that there's a place where we belong, and that if we compromise ourselves and take risks the way that Jesus is asking us to, that we still have a place that we belong and a group of people that will have our backs. And I think that's the church. The second helpful thing here is I think we need to start where Jesus ends. Start where Jesus ends. So in this text, verse 35 and 36, I'll just read it to you here. But love your enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. God is asking, or Jesus is asking us to treat others the way the Lord Most High has treated you. You notice what it says here, this idea of unconditional grace, this unmerited grace, this mercy that Jesus gives to everybody. because God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. That's us. That's me. That's you. That's all of us. God in his kindness reached out to us, who welcomed us into his body, to his community. Paul says, while we were yet sinners, Christ saved us. Not when we earned anything, not when we did the right thing, not when we achieved a certain level of goodness. No, when we were yet sinners, when we were ungrateful and wicked, God was kind to us. And what Jesus is asking us to do is what he has done for us. Jesus is asking us to do for others what God continuously does for us. That even in our ungratefulness and our wickedness, God is always honoring his covenant and said, yes, I've made a covenant with Thomas. He is my person. And even though he does these things and acts these ways, I'm still kind to him. That God is always still kind to us, kind to everyone. Unconditional kindness, unconditional mercy, unconditional grace, unconditional love. And what Jesus is saying is he wants us to extend that to everyone else. And so if we start with what God has done with us, it's easier for us to extend that to others. Whereas if we forget what God has done for us, if we start to think that maybe we've deserved something, we start to think that we're pretty good people, or start things, those thoughts creep in. They certainly creep into my mind, so I'm sure they probably creep into yours. Then once those thoughts take root, it's going to be harder, and I would say even impossible, to extend unconditional kindness to others. But when we remember that we're the recipients of this unconditional kindness, then it becomes easier for us to pass it on to others, pass it on to our enemies, pass it on to those who are actively trying to harm us. So it's a tough text, but I think if we start at the right place, if we know we have that belonging in our church family, if we know that we've received this unconditional kindness from our Father, then we can pass on that what we have ourselves received.